Game 4, I thought, for me personally, was telling more about what the Bucks did successfully in offense than it was them winning just because of Kyrie's ankle injury. Would you say, where would you go on that? Were you more impressed with the Bucks offense and finally kind of clicking, finally knocking down threes, getting 16 of them yesterday? Or was yesterday more of a product of Kyrie's injury and having just KD basically try to play hero ball and couldn't do it in the second half?
Well, I believe the title of the story that I wrote off of the game was overshadowed by Kyrie Irving's injury. The Bucks offense joins the party. So I'm with you. I think the Bucks, like, the most kind of meaningful thing to me, if we were like previewing yesterday's game, would have been like, can Milwaukee get its act together? Like, is this team ever going to look like it did during the regular season? The offense had just been so stodgy and stagnant and slow, and just the lack of player movement, the lack of energy. They weren't getting easy buckets. Like, even though they won game 3, nothing really changed there. I mean, Middleton did get going, which was big for them, but on a sort of broader team-wide level, like, I did not love shots that the Bucks were getting. The numbers were still, I mean, game 3 was by the numbers the worst offensive game they had in the first 3 games of the series, and they basically won because their defense was good and the Nets offense was like shockingly bad. Joe Harris missing wide open shots and KD missing pull-ups where they would step into off of the pick and roll. And I thought the Bucks were really, really, really fortunate to escape with that victory. But game 4 was different. Like, game 4, right from the opening tip, it started with, I mean, the Bucks missed their first couple of shots, but they were good looks. Even like Drew Holiday getting a just clean look off of a dribble handoff on that first possession. You saw as the game went on, they were getting in rhythm threes. Giannis was getting buckets in transition. You saw like Middleton throw him a lob just when he had Jeff Green kind of pinned under the basket, and Giannis just finishes it. And those are kind of demoralizing plays for the opposition. And I think the bigger story for most people is going to be like how this series changes going forward for the Nets. And I sort of like, obviously that's what matters from Brooklyn's perspective. Like, if they only have one star in the next game or in the next couple of games or whatever, like, their season is suddenly in jeopardy when it seemed like they were so clearly the better team through 3 games. That is a shocking shift. But I think if we're just talking about, like, you know, how the Bucks looked, that changed before Kyrie went down.
Right.
And that is significant to me. This was not just they took advantage of a wounded team. They came out looking like a different team.
Giannis has not been shy, especially this postseason, but really in his entire career, of the pull-up game, especially the three-point game. Is that an issue in your mind where Giannis has to cool it down in terms of threes? I mean, he has the 3rd most 3 attempts on the team this postseason. Is that an issue for you, or is that just Giannis kind of trying to find a rhythm and open up the offense and make it even more deadly than it already is?
I mean, from a big picture perspective, like, I'm basically fine with it during the regular season. Like, if Giannis is ever going to be able to make them, he has to take them. I don't think it's his best shot. I don't think it's the most important thing for him to get better at. Like, I think pretty clearly if he can get a little bit more accurate on his mid-range game, if he can get those floaters, just so he has some like counters in there, then like that makes him a lot more dangerous player. It would be awesome if he actually became an above average 3-point shooter, but it's like that's a pretty high bar to clear from where he is right now. So in the playoffs, I don't like it. Like, if he's doing it occasionally, like, whatever, like, I'm not going to make a huge issue out of it, but like 8 in game 3, like that seemed pretty high to me.
Leading the team
a lot of
game.
these, right, and a lot of it to me, like, when I saw him, you know, in both of the first 2 games, you saw him take a pull-up 3 early in the shot clock in like the first few minutes of the game. And those possessions stood out to me because I think it reflected a broader team-wide issue of just not really valuing possessions enough against this Nets team. And I don't think you can afford to do that. Like, I keep referencing, or I at least keep thinking about, during the first round when the Nets played the Celtics, Brad Stevens would say things like, we cannot expect to be in these games if we're scoring 95 points. This is the Brooklyn Nets. Like, we need to get up to 110, 115 if we're going to even have a chance. And that sort of explains some of the things that he was doing. Some of the lineups he was putting out there was like, the Celtics understood they needed to value possessions extremely highly, and they needed to score a lot of points to even have a shot, because they could play great defense against the Nets and they were still going to get their buckets. And I thought the Bucks just, I mean, they're obviously a far more talented team than that version of the Boston Celtics, which was ravaged by injuries. But I thought their approach was way worse. And I thought they did a worse job in terms of doing the little things, in terms of valuing possessions, in terms of just their approach to this matchup in the first 3 games than Boston did throughout its series against Brooklyn.